revealed 3 common foods seniors must never mix with lemon for amazing health benefits. Jane's heart raced as her eyes scrolled past the alarming headline. The quaint small-town diner she loved felt distant, replaced by visions of her grandfather George, always reaching for his beloved lemon-infused chicken at family gatherings. The thought of his bright, vibrant smile as he dished out his recipes, his mother's legacy, was suddenly overshadowed by fear. Could George be at risk because of his lemon-laden favorites? Panic gripped her. At 27, Jane was a nourishing presence in her grandfather's life. As a dedicated nurse, she upheld her family's values, reinforcing the bonds nurtured through shared meals and laughter. George was a World War II veteran, his stories woven into the fabric of her upbringing. They had always been together, her heart beating for family loyalty and the weight of his sacrifices. But this article threatened the very essence of their connection. When Jane exchanged George's cherished recipes with bland health food alternatives, baked chicken without the zesty lemon, she could feel the change, heavy as a thundercloud. The Thanksgiving table, always alive with jubilant chatter, turned to a battleground. The absence of George's lemon chicken echoed with silence, replaced by the scent of steamed vegetables. Each meal became a reminder of what was lost. Jane wanted George to be healthy. He felt stripped of his dignity. "Do you think I can't make my own choices, Jane?" George finally exploded one evening, his voice quaking with hurt. The words cut raw, laced with unspoken sacrifices, like shrapnel piercing her heart. Their eyes locked, and something shifted. She saw a soldier, weary from battle, not just against the world outside, but against a silent war inside. The years of sacrifice, of feeling unworthy, unrecognized, it all tumbled out between them. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Tension lingered over the Thanksgiving feast. Jane could see it in George's eyes. Grief mingled with defiance. The family laughed awkwardly around them, but their connection felt fragile, suspended in the air like a delicate thread. What was supposed to be a celebration morphed into a struggle for understanding. Jane realized that her struggle to be a good granddaughter meant recognizing his fight to maintain his identity. Standing at the kitchen counter, the table set with vibrant dishes devoid of the warmth of history, Jane felt the invisible chasm grow wider. She questioned how to navigate this journey of love and protection. Would she have to sacrifice cherished memories for the sake of health? Or could they find a way to honor both? As the turkey was carved and the room held its collective breath, the real meal, the serving of love, understanding, and forgiveness, remained untouched and silently waiting. What would happen next? How would they bridge this gap of misunderstanding? The air crackled with possibility, each moment hanging delicately as if they were both holding their breath, waiting for the right words to mend what was left lingering in the silence. The silence stretched on, heavy and unyielding, as Jane grappled with her emotions. She glanced at George again, his silver hair catching the soft glow of the table candles. For years she had watched him navigate life with grace, resilience, and a dash of humor. But lately that light seemed dimmed, almost shadowed by the dietary changes she had imposed in the name of care. "Grandpa," Jane started, her voice trembling as she searched for words. "I know you love your lemon chicken. It's just that I read something that worried me and I wanted to keep you healthy." But at what cost? George shot back, his voice rising slightly. My health isn't just about what I eat, Jane. It's about being able to enjoy life, the tastes, the memories. If I can't even have a meal that brings me joy, what's left? A lump formed in Jane's throat. The truth of his words hit her like a tidal wave. She wanted to protect him, yet in her efforts she was robbing him of what made life worth living. Was that the role of a loving granddaughter? Needing answers and hoping for a fresh start, she took a deep breath, willing herself to be brave. I see that now, Grandpa. I'm sorry, she finally whispered, the weight of regret hanging in the air. She lifted her gaze, meeting his cloudy blue eyes that studied her intently. You should be able to share meals that remind you of your childhood. We can find a balance together. The tension in George's features softened, a hint of relief washing over his face. I just want to be part of this family, Jane. I don't want to feel like I'm a burden with all these restrictions. Jane's heart broke for him. She couldn't bear the thought of her grandfather feeling diminished. The room felt lighter at that moment, a fragile thread of understanding woven into their conversation. Let's talk about what you want, she urged. Maybe we can cook together. I'll learn your recipes again, and we can make them healthier without losing the flavors. There it was, a tiny spark of hope rekindled between generations. George nodded slowly, a smile starting to form at the corners of his mouth. You really don't mind mixing a bit of zest back into our meals, even if it's just a sprinkle of lemon here and there? Absolutely, she responded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. We'll make it a family adventure. You are my inspiration, and I want to honor that. As the Thanksgiving feast resumed its course, the laughter grew bolder, and the conversations flowed like a river breaking through a dam. Together, they mapped out plans to revive old recipes, laughing at the kitchen disasters they could undoubtedly anticipate. The tension that had once gripped Jane began to thaw, replaced by anticipation for the meals they would create side by side. But just as Jane felt the nostalgia wrapping around her heart like a cozy blanket, George's brow furrowed. You know, since we are talking about health and food, there's something I'd like to confess. His voice trailed off, and Jane felt a sudden chill. Confessions had a way of revealing hidden truths. Was there something more lurking beneath the surface? What is it, Grandpa? She pressed, sensing the shift in the air. George sighed as if he were summoning old shadows from a forgotten past. There's a secret about your grandma and the recipe for that lemon chicken, something I never shared. Do you want to know? A mixture of dread and excitement filled Jane. What secret could change everything they thought they knew? Her curiosity piqued, she nodded, leaning in closer, determined to uncover the truth. George's eyes darted around the table, as if he was searching for the right words hidden within the laughter and chatter of family. Jane leaned in, her heart racing. The cozy ambiance shrank around them, making the moment electric with anticipation. Your grandma, she had an unusual way with that recipe, George began, his voice dropping to a whisper. The others at the table began to fade into the background, their sounds becoming a distant hum. I never told anyone, not even your mother. But the secret ingredient wasn't just lemon. It was about the memories, the stories she infused with every sprinkle and sauté. George paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Jane held her breath. What do you mean, Grandpa? It was never just about taste, he continued, a soft smile forming. Your grandma would sit by the window, peeling lemons while telling stories of her childhood, her struggles, her victories. She believed food had the power to carry memories. I made that chicken for you because it reminded me of her, of us. He looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his plate. When I switched to healthy alternatives, I thought I was preserving the memories, but instead, I stripped them away. Jane's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She thought about the kitchen disasters, the cooking experiments, and how George had always managed to weave tales into those moments. "So, it's not just about the ingredients," she murmured. "It's about what they really represent." George nodded, his expression suddenly serious. "Exactly. Those stories are the spice of life, Jane. We must embrace those flavors, not fear them." The realization washed over Jane, a wave of warmth mixing with a colder, sharper pang of guilt. "If I'd known," she started, her voice faltering, "I wanted to keep you healthy, but I didn't see you were mourning the past, too." "It's easy to forget that health isn't just physical," George replied, his gaze steady. "It's emotional. It's about living fully. If we can't savor our experiences, what's the point? Let's bring those dishes back, together, not only for the flavors, but for the stories." Hope flickered back in Jane as she leaned closer. "We can spend time not just cooking, but sharing. About Grandma, about your childhood, whatever else comes to mind." There was a spark in George's eyes, a dignified strength that reminded her of the man who once taught her to ride a bike. "Can we start with the lemon chicken then? The real recipe?" she asked, feeling adventurous. George chuckled, a deep, hearty sound that lifted the heaviness in the room. "Only if you promise to make my famous mustard greens as a side. Gotta balance the joy with the nutrition, right?" Laughter filled the air again, pushing away shadows and replacing them with light. As they began to make plans for their culinary journey, Jane felt alive again, not just for the food, but for the history entwined within it. She reached for George's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Let's keep those stories alive, together." But just as the excitement buzzed around the table, George's expression shifted. "But there's something else, Jane. Something darker about that recipe. I haven't been completely honest. Will you still want to know after you hear it?" Jane's breath caught. Did the past really hold something more? Would the secrets bring them closer or pull them apart? She could almost hear the rustle of the leaves outside, urging her to press for the truth. What lay beneath the sweetness of memories could change everything. Jane felt a chill run through her, a contrast to the warmth that had just enveloped them. George's tone held a heaviness that twisted in her gut. "What do you mean, Grandpa?" She searched his eyes, wanting to draw out the truth that hung between them like an uninvited guest. George sighed, gazing down once more, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "Your grandma, she had a past that wasn't all sunshine and lemon pie. The story behind that chicken recipe is rooted in something darker than I ever wanted to admit." Tension filled the air, pressing closer until Jane could hardly breathe. "I need to know, Grandpa. Whatever it is, I'm here." Her resolve surprised her, a flicker of courage igniting within. He hesitated, a far-off look haunting his features. "There was a time when we faced hardships no one talks about. I thought shielding you and your mother from pain was the right way to honor her memory. We had to change the recipe because it became a reminder of what we lost rather than what we cherished." "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, almost afraid to disturb the fragile moment. "There was a toxic relationship, a neighbor who preyed on her, who made her feel less than. My sweet girl, who could fill a room with laughter, was crushed beneath the weight of it. Cooking became her escape. The recipes we held dear were also her way of reclaiming her story, her power," George revealed, his voice quivering. Jane's heart ached. She could picture her grandmother sitting by that window, the sun casting a golden hue upon her worn hands as she tried to mask her pain with lemon zest. "You didn't tell Mom either?" The betrayal hung heavily, a shadow that threatened to obscure joyous memories. "No, I thought revealing it would only deepen the hurt, George admitted, a sorrowful edge creeping into his voice. But then I took away every flavor that came with healing. Every ounce of lemon and love was replaced with blandness, as if I thought I could sterilize the past. But you can't remove the essence of the people we love. Clarity washed over Jane as she understood, not just about her grandmother, but about George, too. His own wounds had shaped so much of their lives. Do you think bringing back the old recipes will uncover more pain, or is it a chance to heal? George met her gaze, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Both. We can embrace the past, flaws and all. The stories, the pain, and the joy, they're all ingredients. They'll flavor our lives. Then let's do it. I want to remember Grandma fully, not just the shiny version. Jane felt alive with purpose. Let's honor her by making her chicken, the way she made it, all of it. Just as George smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes, a distant thunder rumbled overhead. The atmosphere seemed to shift, as if the clouds outside shared in their intensity. Jane felt a deep-seated need to press on. But wait, is there more? You said something darker. What if it changes how we see her, or you? George's expression faltered, shadows clouding it once more. Yes, there's something I need to tell you about the ingredients, one that could break our connection to her altogether. Jane's heartbeat quickened, anticipation coiling tightly in her chest. What could it be? The answer loomed larger than the kitchen itself, a secret that promised to unravel everything. Would she still want to know if the truth threatened the very fabric of their family? The storm outside grew more pronounced, wind rattling the windows and casting a dim light across the worn kitchen. Jane's pulse raced, the air around them tinged with the unresolved tension. She felt like a tightened string, ready to snap at any moment. "Grandpa, what's the secret?" Her words felt insistent, a plea for understanding. It can't be worse than what we've already uncovered. George took a deep breath, as if he were about to plunge into icy waters. Your grandmother's special chicken wasn't just any recipe. It called for a rare herb, one she was given by that neighbor, the one who hurt her. Jane's brow furrowed as she tried to grasp the gravity of his revelation. "What do you mean, an herb? What does that have to do with anything?" "He told her it was a flavoring, a way to enhance her cooking," George explained, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid the walls might intrude upon their secret. "But it wasn't just that. It carried a certain poison, both literally and figuratively. It could manipulate feelings, cloud judgment. Your grandma believed it brought out the spark in her food, but it masked something deeper." Jane felt the weight of his words. The thought of her grandmother's cherished recipe being tainted was a bitter pill to swallow. So she didn't just cook to escape, she was trapped? In a way, yes. George's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She used that chicken recipe to hide, to forge a connection to joy that was fleeting, but it became a cycle of pain. When I discovered this, I thought changing the recipe was the answer. I wanted to reclaim her dignity, her joy. Instead, I lost the essence of who she was. Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Jane's mind raced as she struggled to reconcile the woman she adored with this newfound complexity. "Maybe we don't need to abandon it entirely," she ventured carefully. "We could work together, find out what this herb was, how it affected her. Maybe then we can truly know her and what she endured." George studied her face, admiration blooming like spring flowers. "You're stronger than I was at your age," he said, a soft smile breaking through the heaviness. "You're willing to confront the shadows, and that's the first step to healing. But if we go down this path, if we discover more, what if we can't handle it?" Jane wondered aloud, her voice trembling. He reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. Life is filled with uncomfortable truths, Jane. It's how we rise above them that matters. If we open this door, it might sting, but it could also lead us to the heart of our family. And we owe that to your grandmother. The playful aroma of spices hung faintly in the air, somehow still inviting despite the weight of their shared burden. Jane's heart fluttered with hope and trepidation all at once. Let's do it then. But where do we even start? George nodded, determination rising in him. We'll dig through her old cookbooks, find the notes that she wrote down. We might also need to speak with neighbors who knew her better. Bring back the past, layer by layer. As they moved to begin their search, another rumble of thunder echoed outside. Jane paused, an unsettling thought creeping into her mind. What if we uncover something that leads us to regret? Her grandfather hesitated, then offered a solemn nod. Or perhaps something that sets us free. That they pored over the books, hope mingling with anxiety as the storm raged outside. Little did they know, the search would lead them closer to a truth that remained buried far beneath their cherished memories. Could Jane handle the weight of the history they were about to uncover? The kitchen dimmed further as the storm unleashed its fury outside, rain lashing against the windows like urgent whispers. Jane and George huddled at the table, surrounded by the fragile treasures of her grandmother's past, worn cookbooks, handwritten notes, and the scent of memories lingering in the air. The pages they turned felt alive, each one a bridge to a time that offered shadows and light in equal measure. Here, George said, his fingers trembling slightly as he flipped a page marked by a yellowing photograph of her grandmother standing proudly by the stove. This one has a note. As he read aloud, Jane leaned closer, her heart pounding. The herb, it's called stellera, she wrote. Dried leaves bring out the best in her dishes, but there's a warning too. Handle with care. Its essence can betray. Jane shuddered, the gravity of the message seeping into her bones. Betray? What does that mean? George leaned back, his expression distant. It suggests a duality. Like your grandma, it could create joy or despair. We need to understand more. The two plunged deeper into the trove of memories, each recipe revealing a layer of the woman they adored. Conversations crafted from flour and spices turned into fragments of laughter and warmth, yet the shadow of sorrow flickered just beyond the light. They sifted through pages, engulfed in the warmth of nostalgia, while also bracing against an uncommon cool draft that seemed to weave through the room, carrying secrets that wanted to remain hidden. Here's another note, Jane's voice broke the silence. She mentions a dinner party, a night filled with laughter, but she writes, I felt a veil over my heart. It was sweet, yet so heavy. What a poignant struggle, George said softly, his eyes reflecting the same blend of pride and grief. It was a dual existence. She wanted to bring happiness through food, but it was intertwined with her pain. They continued their hunt, the tension woven tightly like a tapestry of emotions. As they reached the final cookbook, a caked spine holding what felt like the heart of her culinary legacy, George's hands shook as he opened it. The pages rustled in the breeze from the open window, as if whispering warnings of their own. There's a section here that's different, he noted. Glimmers of other herbs. Look at this. Stellera's bitterness also has its source in sorrow. Mix with joy for balance, yet beware of excess. What does it mean to mix with joy? Jane pondered aloud. Is it about the ingredients, or is it deeper than just cooking? I think it's both, George replied, his eyes meeting hers with intensity. It's about purpose in creation. If she poured her happiness into the food, could it weigh against the sorrow? With the flickering candlelight dancing in the stormy night, the enormity of their undertaking settled heavily between them. George sighed. Maybe confronting this truth is exactly what we need. It may lead us back to her spirit, to who she really was. A louder clap of thunder rattled the kitchen as Jane felt a collective shiver run through her. And what if it breaks us instead? We protect ourselves by understanding, George offered. Each layer uncovered may lead us to clarity rather than pain. With resolve sinking deeper into their bones, they prepared to reach out to those who once stood alongside her in the warmth of family gatherings and laughter, hoping for insights that could illuminate the path forward. But Jane couldn't shake the feeling that some stories were never meant to be unearthed, that some ghosts clung tightly to the past. Was that the heart of the matter? Could they truly handle the mix of secrets and truths that brewed just below the surface? As the storm began to quiet, leaving a heavy stillness in its wake, Jane felt the weight of uncertainty and hope. They were on the brink of something significant, discovery or regret, a truth that awaited in the shadows. And outside, the darkness loomed, threatening to spill deeper into their unraveling narrative. What would they uncover next, and would it ultimately bridge the chasm between pain and healing? The candlelight flickered dangerously, casting shadows that danced along the walls, echoing the turmoil swirling within Jane. "We should start with Ellie," she suggested, her voice barely above the wind. Ellie had been a childhood friend of her grandmother, a vibrant woman with the kind of laughter that would fill a room to the brim. It felt right that they begin their search with someone who had shared in those dinners filled with joy, and those veils of sorrow. George nodded in agreement. "I'll call her tomorrow. If anyone can shed some light, it's her." As the winds outside began to quiet, Jane felt a weight begin to lift. The might of the storm had dimmed, but the remnants of it lingered in her mind, much like the unresolved questions about her grandmother's life. What had her family been hiding? With the tomes of her grandmother sitting open before them, the ideas began to swirl like a pot of stew, the flavors melding, ingredients uniting. "What if we tried to recreate one of her meals?" Jane suggested suddenly, her face lighting up with a spark of energy. "We could see if there's a certain joy that comes from it. Maybe that would help us connect with her." "Brilliant," George replied, his eyes brightening. "If we mix the stellara correctly with joy, whatever that might mean, we might actually understand something greater." It felt like a daring step into their lineage, into a piece of history that had been tucked away. They both got to work, poring over the pages of the worn cookbooks, looking for a recipe to bring back to life. Each line of text seemed to crackle with latent magic. The honesty in the ingredients felt like a breadcrumb trail leading them back to her, back to the essence of family love woven through every meal. Hours passed as ingredients were chosen and a plan took shape. They settled on a dish that featured stellara prominently, an herb infused in a hearty stew. It felt bold yet respectful. The air thickened with anticipation as they gathered what they would need. But Jane couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. What would happen if the mix unraveled? The stakes felt higher than just a meal. They were trying to summon a past that felt fragile. "That night could hold the key," George muttered, as he engaged in conversation with Jane about cooking techniques. He seemed entranced by the potential within the dish they were about to prepare. "Do you think she really mixed joy in, or is that just a fanciful notion?" "I don't know," Jane replied, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "But I need to believe it. If there's any indication of truth in these notes, maybe understanding this recipe will lead us to something meaningful, something that can heal." George looked at her with concern. "And what if it doesn't, Jane? What if the past is too weighty for us to carry?" The questions loomed large, like dark clouds threatening another storm. "Then I guess we'll find out what it means to face what we fear," she whispered, her heart racing. "But if we can do this together, then we're already making progress. We'll connect not just with her, but with ourselves, too." With hopeful anticipation, they began their evening's preparations, chopping vegetables, dicing meat, mixing spices. The rhythm of their movements became a dance, and soon laughter spilled from their lips as they attempted to mimic the rustic joy her grandmother might have instilled in the kitchen. But as the stew bubbled, the air thickened with more than just aromas. An unpredictable tension permeated the evening, and Jane felt the shadows deepen. "Let's remember, whatever happens, we're doing this for her," George reminded her, as thunder continued to rumble over the hills once more, reverberating through the night. "Right," Jane said, though a haunting question flickered in her mind. Could joy truly counteract sorrow, or would they find themselves unearthing more than just family recipes? Days into this kitchen quest, and they were still just scratching the surface. What awaited them as they stirred the pot? Would they summon joy, or unleash the ghosts of the past, intertwined with every bite? With hearts pounding in sync with the gentle thunder outside, they understood one thing: tomorrow would reveal either healing or heartache. As they poured in the stellara, the air grew electric, setting the stage for truths they weren't yet ready to face. And something told Jane they were about to unveil secrets that might change everything. What would tomorrow bring in this search for balance? Morning light peeked through the kitchen window as Jane and George stirred up the remnants of the previous day's concoction. The scent of stellara lingered in the air, earthy and rich. It felt like an invocation, a command to summon memories long buried. Jane's heart raced with a blend of excitement and trepidation. "Are you ready?" George asked, glancing at her with a mix of hope and anxiety. She could see the determination in his eyes. Today would be pivotal. "More than ready," Jane replied, though her voice trembled. She wanted to uncover the heart of her grandmother's legacy, but what if they only found more questions? They embarked on their hunt for Ellie, following an address scribbled in one of the cookbooks. As they drove, the sunlight streamed through the trees, their vibrant green leaves shimmering, almost as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover whatever it was they were meant to discover. "Do you think she'll remember us?" Jane wondered aloud, recalling the last family gathering where Ellie had appeared wearing her characteristic smile. "Count on it," George reassured her. "She's got a heart as immense as this world. I bet she'll have stories to share, ones we really need to hear." Pulling into her driveway, Jane felt the familiar rush of nostalgia wash over her. The house was still as charming as she remembered, decorative gnomes flanking the path, flowers blooming hungrily in the garden. They climbed the steps, and just as Jane raised her hand to knock, the door swung wide. "Jane! George!" Ellie exclaimed, arms opening wide for a warm embrace. Her laughter rang out, sending waves of comfort through Jane's heart. It felt like returning to a home she hadn't known was waiting. "Do you remember the gatherings?" Jane asked after the storm of greetings calmed down. "All those dinners with Grandma? Of course! Those were the best days!" Ellie's eyes misted over, and Jane sensed an effervescent joy, yet shadowed by something deeper. "She had a light about her, didn't she?" Jane nodded, eager for more. "We've been trying to recreate one of her recipes. We're hoping to, find some connection, understand her better." "I'd love to help with that," Ellie's enthusiasm surged. She scooted them into her cozy kitchen, where spice jars lined the shelves, and every corner held memories waiting to be shared. "What's the secret ingredient?" Ellie asked cheerfully, reaching for a bundle of herbs. Jane felt a tightness in her chest as a moment of realization flickered. She remembered her grandmother's unwavering belief that food wasn't just nourishment, It was a medium for love and healing. "We're using Stellara in her stew," Jane confessed, a hint of apprehension creeping into her tone. "But we're also hoping to discover how joy ties into it all." Ellie's expression changed. She leaned in closely. "Your grandmother believed that joy was the essential ingredient. It was about family and togetherness. But there were shadows too. Things weren't always bright. Sometimes she would carry a sadness from the past that she didn't share. An electric charge filled the air, much like the sensation they felt in the kitchen the previous night." Jane's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Her stories were often tangled with loss, love that faded, dreams that shattered. You see, understanding the joy means confronting the shadows. Are you ready for that? Ellie's voice trembled slightly, her eyes searching Jane's face for comprehension. Jane felt the ground beneath her shake, the shadows of her past suddenly colliding with her present. "I think so, but what if the shadows are too heavy?" The room fell silent. George exchanged worried glances with Ellie before he spoke. "Sometimes joy is born from facing those shadows. Maybe that's really what you're seeking." Taking a deep breath, Jane realized the stakes had just gotten higher. It wasn't just about a recipe anymore. What awaited her was a journey through laughter and tears, but perhaps also revelations that would forever change her family's narrative. As they gathered around the table, gathering ingredients and stories alike, a question pulsed in Jane's heart. Would they be strong enough to face whatever lay ahead? And as the sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating memories long forgotten, Jane wondered, not just about her grandmother's recipe, but about the courage it would take to embrace both joy and sorrow entwined like strands in a tapestry. What other truths would emerge from this simple kitchen, and how would they define her? The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around them like a favorite blanket, but Jane felt a tight coil of anxiety in her chest. As she and George set the ingredients on the table, she noticed Ellie quietly rearranging a small collection of old photographs. Each one seemed to tell a story that transcended the years. "Your grandma loved to cook with laughter," Ellie said, glancing toward Jane with a nostalgic smile. "She always said that we should never mix sadness in with the food. It changes the taste." George looked intrigued, leaning closer. "Did she have any special rules?" Ellie nodded, her eyes sparkling. "She always taught me to pair flavors with love. If she was feeling down, she'd make something comforting, like her famous mac and cheese. But if she was happy, she'd whip up something with Stellara, something bright and bold." "What if life isn't all about those bright moments?" Jane asked, a sense of urgency pushing her words forward. "What if the shadows, those painful memories, overshadow those joys?" "Well, sometimes that's where the real magic happens," Ellie replied, her voice soft but steady. "Your grandma believed in facing those shadows head on. It's how you grow." Taking a step back, Jane looked out the kitchen window, the sun's rays filtering through the leaves. Could she face her own shadows? Was she ready to uncover all the family secrets tangled with joy and sorrow? "Let's get started," George finally said, breaking the silence. "We need to feel it all. The joy, the sorrow, everything in between." As the three of them began chopping vegetables and stirring the Stellara into the pot, a sense of energy filled the air. Every clink of a knife on a cutting board echoed with the laughter they had shared over the years, Fridays with Grandma, and soft songs sung while stirring pots in the kitchen. Do you think she really was afraid of sharing her sadness? Jane dipped her spoon into the simmering pot, the aroma engulfing them. Ellie paused, her expression thoughtful. People often fear vulnerability, but sharing those shadows can create deeper connections, better understanding of what we've endured. Your grandma found strength in sharing her stories, even when they hurt. The weight of that reflection lingered. Did Jane possess the strength to share her fears? Did she really want to dig deeper into the unresolved pieces of her family's past? Hey, do you think we could create something in honor of Grandma? Something that celebrates her spirit, but also acknowledges the struggles she faced? Jane proposed, glancing at both George and Ellie. Ellie smiled brightly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Absolutely. Let's turn this stew into a tribute, something that reminds us of her strength and resilience. We can add our own twists, but also honor her recipe. As they worked side by side, laughter mixed with gentle tears. Each interaction was infused with a sense of hope. This was more than just cooking. It became a sacred act, turning their apprehensions into something tangible. The words joy and sorrow transformed before them, crafting a new narrative. With each layered flavor, Jane felt a stirring within her heart. Could they truly create a dish that honored both light and dark? As the stew bubbled and thickened, awaiting the final touches, Jane's resolve swelled. She wanted to face whatever shadows awaited her. What other untold tales rested inside that pot, simmering beneath the surface? With a final stir of the spoon, she turned to Ellie. "Can you tell me more about Grandma's shadows? What else should we know before we taste?" The room filled with a profound hush, the kind that held 100 unsaid stories poised on the edge of their lips. Would uncovering those truths unravel something beautiful or something painful? As Jane awaited Ellie's answer, trepidation and anticipation intertwined, leaving the air thick with possibility. "Your grandmother carried her shadows with a grace that few could understand," Ellie began, her voice soft but vivid with memories. "She had a light about her, yes, but beneath that, life shaped her with stark realities. It wasn't just about mixing flavors, it was about making peace with her past." Jane leaned in, caught by the weight of Ellie's words. What kind of struggles did she face? Was it hard for her to talk about? "Very much so," Ellie continued, her eyes growing distant for a moment. "After your grandfather returned from the war, things were never the same, at least not right away. He was changed, you know. The war left marks on her, and she bore those impacts silently. I remember her telling me about days when she couldn't find a reason to smile, even in a crowded room. Cooking became her refuge, a way to create happiness even when she felt isolated inside." George nodded solemnly. "We all carry burdens we don't speak of, but she had a special way of turning sorrow into something profound. It wasn't just a recipe, it was a lifeline." Jane felt a surge of empathy. This wasn't just about flavors, it was tangible emotions tethered to every meal. So she mixed joy with her sorrow by cooking? "Yes," Ellie affirmed, "but it took time for her to embrace both. She learned that acknowledging sadness didn't diminish the joy she could create. It actually enhanced it by giving it depth and meaning." The idea struck Jane deeply. If we can recreate her chicken stew, we need to do it with that understanding, celebrating joy and allowing the sorrow to linger in the background. It feels important to honor both sides of her life. "Exactly," George said, flexing his fingers around the wooden spoon. "We're not erasing those memories, we're infusing them into this meal." With that shared resolve, they continued to cook, chopping, stirring, and tasting, a trio woven together by shared purpose and understanding. Blues and golds of several spices danced across the counter, creating aromas that were much more than ingredients. They were bridges reaching into the past. As the stew simmered, the aromas wafted through the kitchen like elements of their shared history, igniting Jane's imagination. Images of her grandmother flickered in her mind, a woman cooking with laughter echoing against the walls, despite the veil of sadness that occasionally swept over her. Let's add a pinch of stellara and speak her name. Invoke her spirit into this meal, Jane suggested with a soft smile, remembering her grandmother's laughter. Absolutely, Ellie said with a nod. Let's honor her legacy together. As they stirred in the final touches of flavors, Jane felt an exhilaration wash over her. Faces blurred, recollections swirling together, knitting experiences from disparate corners of her heart. And then, in one beautifully orchestrated moment, they set the table with the warm bowls of stew. Tension and love filled the air, an energy humming beneath the surface, laced with anticipation. "Are you ready to taste this journey?" George asked, his eyes glistening. "Yes," Jane breathed, excitement apparent in her voice but tinged with apprehension. They each took their bowls, the vibrant story laid out before them, visible in the glistening stew. As they lifted their spoons, the room was charged with an intensity, each heartbeat echoing loudly through the silence. Gradually, they took the plunge and tasted. The flavors exploded, filling their senses with warmth, richness, and an inexplicable heaviness that swirled with moments of sheer joy. "Oh, wow!" Ellie gasped. "This is incredible!" With each bite, Jane felt waves of emotion crashed over her. Joy, sorrow, nostalgia. The intricate blend of flavors held space for her grandmother's stories, imbued with all the losses and triumphs, the ingredients of a life truly lived. She noticed George's eyes were glistening. "I can almost hear her laughter dancing around us," he whispered, and Jane felt a surge of love enveloping them. They laughed, cried, and shared stories, allowing the food to stir memories that felt precious. With each connection, they stitched together a tapestry of their family history, one that acknowledged every facet of life. "Thank you for bringing this back to life," Jane said softly, her hand resting on George's as they savored the stew. "Together, we've laughed, cried, and shared stories, allowing the food to stir memories that felt precious." With each connection, they stitched together a tapestry of their family history, one that acknowledged every facet of life. "Thank you for bringing this back to life," Jane said softly, her hand resting on George's as they savored the stew. "Together, we've rekindled the stories that matter. Here's to family, to resilience, to facing both joy and sorrow." George raised his bowl. Ellie chimed in, "And to the legacies that continue to inspire us. May we carry them forward." The air shimmered as laughter filled the kitchen, binding them closer in the depths of the stew. They understood now. With every ingredient came the essence of what it meant to live fully. Together, they savored not just the meal, but the love, the history, and the courage to face whatever truths lay hidden. And just outside the window, the sun began to break through the clouds, illuminating their journey toward healing. The shadows may always linger, but so would the light of connection, promise, and the unwavering strength of family. In this moment, Jane knew they had done more than recreate a meal. They had begun to heal the heart of their history. Now, as you reflect on this concluding chapter of Jane and George's journey, seize this moment to act. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts in helping others find this journey. Comment below your thoughts, reactions, and feelings about this heartfelt conclusion. And please share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to be inspired by this transformation. You never know how it may touch their hearts. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait, not even one more second to share.